Previously on the Scream Retrospective, Welshy left his room and got a drink. Then Welshy reviewed Scream 3. Then he was attacked by Ghostface, so Welshy shot him. Then he unmasked him to reveal Rob the Monkey, only to get a call from Not Failus who told him to review Killjoy, which he did. And, well, that was it. Yeah. Now back to the Scream Retrospective.
The month of October, all leading up to one of my favourite times of year. I officially joined the site in October of last year, although it was a little while before I was recognised as being Welshy, because someone got confused and thought that I was Sad Panda and thought that Panda was Welshy. And that's a silly mistake to make, isn't it, Rob? Silly.
The following gag has been removed.
Alright, I'll stop. For now. Damn you, Walker. The month of October is, of course, also Halloween, and for a 5-year cycle, it was a tradition for me to go to the cinema with one of my closest friends and watch the latest Saw film. Saw Retrospective, coming next Halloween, if I haven't been fired yet. And another tradition was for me to have a Scream Marathon, either by myself or with another of my closest friends. Well, I say that. She was one of my closest friends until she decided that seeing me in a corset and fishnets would be funny. Thank you very much, Pip. Still, I did blow up a country last week, so I guess that kind of makes us even. Hello?
Finally, I've been waiting here for...
Hold on a sec, dude. Wrong line.
Oh, okay.
Hello?
Matt, you blew up my country and killed my one-eyed boggy. We will never be even.
She's so funny. For over 10 years, Scream was a trilogy, 3 films ranging in quality, loved by some, hated by others, and then in 2008 it was announced that Scream 4 was coming, Craven directing, Williamson writing, and eventually with Neve Campbell confirming she was coming back, the whole original surviving cast returning.
Been through a lot together.
If you can imagine me exploding into a ball of excitement upon hearing this news, that is pretty much exactly what happened. That excitement only grew when I saw the first teaser trailer, but then I went into complete shutdown mode, refusing to watch any more teasers, trailers, or interviews for fear of getting spoilt. This wasn't going to be some half-assed attempt at a Scream film from a writer who didn't understand the subgenre that Scream had made so popular. This was going to be a real Scream film from Scream's creators, and I was determined to go into this as blind as possible. I know people out there hated Scream 4, even hardcore Scream fans hated it. I'm fine with that. I'm not about to call people out for dissing a movie. It's a movie, it belongs to the public, and the public can look at it any way they want. But I'll say this now, it is pretty much impossible for me to actually hate a Scream film. So if you're watching this expecting me to tear the film apart, you might as well stop now. I don't mind, you've already clicked the video, so I'm getting paid. Unless you have adblock on, in which case, keep watching, we're all friends here.
I'm gonna slit your eyelids in half so you don't blink when I stab you in the face.
This is also a message to the people out there who usually say, stuff the history, just show us the film. This is still technically part of my Scream Retrospective, so this is the history bit, so you might want to skip on about 5 minutes.
We'll have some fun with you before you die.
After the release of Scream 3, the trilogy was complete and everybody went their separate ways. Wes Craven wanted to put more emphasis on producing, Kevin Williamson wanted to focus on directing, Courtney Cox had friends, Neve Campbell wanted to further her career, and David Arquette wanted to become WCW champion. Sadly, that last bit isn't a lie. Although, to be fair to David Arquette, and to stop wrestling fans from flaming me, he was very much against the idea of being made champion.
By the time Scream 4 came out, Craven had released Red Eye, which I reviewed, go watch it, and reteamed with Williamson to release Cursed, which Looper reviewed. Go watch it. Dave Campbell and David Arquette had fallen off the face of the earth, and Courtney Cox was the only one actually working, which I'm not that surprised about, as I always felt out of the female side of the Friends cast, she was the one with actual talent.
Yep, that's bound to split the crowd.
Scream 4 was coming into a very different world in some regards, but also a similar situation to the world its original came into. When Scream was released, the slasher genre was pretty much in the toilet, with the focus more on the zombie stalker supernatural killer. With the release of Scream 4, the genre was also back in the toilet, only this time, instead of being overrun with bad slashers featuring the supernatural, what we had now was a genre filled with reboots and retoolings.
Because all there are now are remakes. Only horror the studio's greenlight.
Turning the horror icons and monsters of yesterday into pathetic characters with backstories which were used to generate sympathy, which took away everything that made them scary in the first place. Yes, this is pretty much my whole opinion of the horror remake fad that we're currently going through. Add to that the birth of torture porn.
I hate all that torture porn shit. How do you really feel?
And the brutal, more realistic approach many of the attempted slashers were trying to pull off while populating their worlds with crass, foul-mouthed, unlikable characters. Scream 4 was in a situation where it had much to mock, as did Scream 1 and 2, but after 10 years it could also get lost in the pack by not being gruesome enough to satisfy today's torture porn craving public.
And in a way, it kinda did. But I've yet to explain why it's almost impossible for me to hate a Scream film. And if you watch my Scream Retrospective, you'll know that I was able to tear into Scream 3 for nearly an hour. But at the end of that, I still admitted that I liked it.
Scream and the Scream series was also my coming-of-age film, and yes, I do realise how strange that sounds. The first time I saw Scream, I didn't have the internet or even a computer. Yes, 1997 was truly a techless year when it came to personal computers in the Welshy household. Scream came out, and I was sucked into it. The hype for Scream 2 was off the charts, unlike nothing I'd ever seen before, but I could only catch little snippets, being as, at the time, we only had 5 TV channels.
Truly, this was a savage time.
It was when I went to college that I got my first taste of the internet and, more importantly, online forums and fandom. The very first forum I joined was a Scream forum, ScreamTrilogy.com, hosted by Morbid Much, and featured a gaggle of Scream fans all bouncing around ideas and theories about the killers, and any time something new was reported about Scream 3, the forum would explode with posts. I was swept up into it. I even wrote a Scream 4 script. Okay, it was bad, actually looking back, it was terrible. But that is just an example of the enthusiasm I had for these films and how much fun it was to bounce these ideas off of people who were really fans. And it's really because of Scream that I began having an online presence in the first place. I made friends on these forums. One of them is still a friend today, and she's even appeared in Panda Q&A.
You didn't tell me you knew Smarty.
Who's Smarty?
Damn it! I knew it! The lying sucker!
Change, please!
This really was a fun time in my life, and in a way, I do have Scream to thank for that.
Now, there's probably people out there saying how sad I am for saying all this, but I don't care, and I'm not ashamed of it. There's people out there today still doing that very thing. Harry Potter forums, Lost forums, Saw forums, even that guy with the glasses forums. There's websites out there with their own forums dedicated to talking about this website and its producers. And they'll get together in their communities every day to discuss it, what they like and what they don't like. It's fun. It's fun to do. And Scream was my first. And you never forget your first.
Right, history lesson over. So when I heard another Scream was coming out, I was happier than a child at Christmas. I was happier than a Star Wars fan before the release of Episode 1. And when I heard Kevin Williamson was writing it, you could have just killed me then, because I could have died happy. Then I heard Aaron Kruger was coming in to do some rewrites, which instantly dulled the mood. Coupled with Craven's terrible My Soul to Take, it did nothing to strengthen my belief that his tank had run dry from a directing standpoint.
But I want to stress, going into Scream 4, I wasn't expecting a masterpiece. I wasn't expecting something to rewrite the rulebook or turn the subgenre on its head again like Scream 1 did. I just wanted a Scream film. Scream 3, as I've said, for me, didn't feel like a Scream film. So going into Scream 4 and wanting a Scream film, that's exactly what I got.
It had everything I loved about the previous films. It had a smaller cast, which made actually giving them an identity a lot easier. It had Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox and David Arquette back in their familiar roles. It had Ghostface. It had Roger Jackson's voice.
Are you writing this down?
It had a snappy script, and more importantly, it felt like a Scream film. Was it perfect? No, of course not. Were there moments of utter stupidity where what was happening made absolutely no sense? You bet. But I'm not going to let those things ruin my enjoyment of the film.
You're overthinking it. Am I, or did whoever make it just underthink it?
So before I actually talk about the film in detail, I'll list some of the things I liked about it, and some of the things I didn't. A very red letter media of me, just without the talent. Hey-oh! First,
Sydney and Gale. If you remember my Scream 3 review, you remember my rage at the mishandling of Sydney and Gale. With Scream 4, there was no scheduling problems. Neve Campbell was back full-time, and with Williamson writing the characters again, Sydney and Gale were back to being Sydney and Gale.
I still got it.
Strong, independent women who don't run and scream for Dewey every time someone makes them jump. In the case of Sydney, she feels like a whole character again. In fact, she feels like a woman, and it really feels like she's grown since the events of Scream 3.
Nothing, you remind me of, me.
Dewey is back to being the slightly dim-witted but well-meaning carer, and if anything, he's almost pushed to the sidelines, which is another plus for me given how much of a Dewey overload Scream 3 was.
That is not public information.
It is all over the internet, Dewey.
It is?
While Gale is back to being Gale, Courtney Cox just seems to be able to relish being able to play Gale again, and there isn't a hint of the whiny hang-on Gale that I had to put up with in Scream 3. This is the Gale of Scream 1 and 2, a Gale who goes it alone and can be ruthless with it.
Turn that fucking thing off.
Next, the phone voice. I loved the killer conversations in this film. No crappy voice changer from the 25th century that makes you sound like every actor in the cast. This is Roger Jackson letting his inner evil loose with some great moments of dialogue.
But if you want to be in the hospital, I'd be happy to put you there. In the fucking morgue!
There's also a great running gag as Ghostface uses a particular character's phone to make his calls, and it leads to some fun moments for me, as Ghostface gets progressively more frustrated as characters keep addressing him as Trevor.
Do I sound like a Trevor to you? I'm not Trevor. This isn't Trevor. This is not fucking Trevor.
I'll admit it is the nostalgia talking, but it's so great hearing the Ghostface voice again. Third, the opening. Looking back, the multiple openings went on a little too long, I felt. But for the film's real opening scene, again, after the schmoz that was Scream 3, this felt like a Scream opening. It addressed the scary movie parodies in a nice way.
This isn't a comedy. It's a horror film. People live, people die.
And seeing Ghostface just at the top of the stairs again made me feel good and brought back that warm feeling of nostalgia. The opening managed to parody Scream's own opening.
Hello?
Hello.
Comment on the torture porn craze, the Scream legacy.
It's been done to death. The whole self-aware, postmodern meta shit.
The endless sequels horror films are associated with, and even took a dig at Jason X.
Step 5 has time travel, which is by far the worst.
And it does all this in the first 10 minutes. This is why I like the opening, and I think it's leaps and bounds ahead of anything Scream 3 tried to give me. After the Scream 4 title popped up, I can remember my friend Pip turning to me and saying very clearly, that was a Scream opening. And she was right. Fourth, the character of Kirby. When the teaser was released and the focus of the movie seemed to be on movie geeks Robbie and Charlie, everyone claimed, correctly, that the film was attempted to make these characters into the next Randy Meeks.
There are still rules, but the rules have changed.
The film blatantly admits that's what it was doing as far as Charlie goes. But in terms of the Randy character, as I've said before, Jamie Kennedy is the only actor who could ever play that role. What I find interesting is that with the audience locked into the idea that the film is trying to create a new Randy with Robbie and Charlie, a line spoken in the film itself by one of these characters,
the natural next step in a psycho-slasher innovation,
shows that the film actually did move the whole movie geek stereotype forward with the character of Kirby, played brilliantly by Hayden Panettiere. Kirby is everything Randy was. She's a movie geek who loves the genre, knows the rules, and can school anyone on horror lore.
I could trivia your ass under the table, Cinema Boy.
The difference, she's hot as hell, and that is a neat turn in the horror geek role. Back in any Friday the 13th, Halloween, or hell, even the first Scream film, Kirby would have been the traditional dumb blonde. And after seeing the film, I went back and looked up reports, and that's what everyone assumed she was going to be in this film. But here, she's smart, sassy, resourceful, loyal, funny, sexy with a sarcastic edge, and she's a horror geek.
You're a genre nut, Kirby. What's your favorite scary movie?
Bambi.
She is the best character of the new brood, and the best thing about it is, like Randy before her, I'm sure it came about almost by total accident.
Come on, Mr. Ghostface, whisper to me. Aren't you supposed to ask me a question?
Because I always felt that Randy became a star because Kevin Williamson just fell in love while writing for him, and began to realise that Randy could do things in the Scream world that other characters couldn't. Kirby fits that role. She's very much the modern geek. You see attractive women at cons and movie launches all the time these days, but back in 1996, it was a way different story, and Kirby captures that version of the world perfectly. Okay, so that's the things that really stood out to me about the film and things that I liked. The things I didn't like about it, one of them I can't really talk about now because it would give away a huge potential spoiler, because it happens at the end of the film. So I'll just say the hospital, and leave it at that. So if we call the hospital my first big complaint, My second complaint about the film would be Wes Craven's direction. Like I said in Red Eye, I felt Craven peaked from a directing standpoint as far as the Scream franchise goes with Scream 2. In Red Eye, he showed he can work the psychological thriller angle and can do it really well, whereas films like Cursed and My Soul to Take felt to me like he had really nothing more to offer in the scare department. The same, sadly, is true of Scream 4. Nothing really scared me about this film, and it's mainly thanks to the script and the cast themselves that I enjoyed the film as much as I did, because there were really only 2 scenes where the direction actually got me involved and invested, and I jumped. And one of those scenes was a direct homage to the first film. So Craven wasn't really doing anything new there anyway. Given the choice of bringing in a new director though, I'd still say no, as Craven, despite his lackluster direction in this film, still has an idea of what tension is and doesn't feel the need to cut every 5 seconds. Have close-ups where you can't tell what's going on, or just over-brutalise a death scene.
You gotta have an opening sequence that blows the doors off, dial up some flashy music video direction, and the kills gotta be way more extreme.
And the third thing I didn't like? Characters acting stupid. It happens in horror films all the time, but damn it's annoying when it does. Gail going back into the barn when she's clearly seen the killer moving her camera. Rebecca getting out of her car when she's perfectly safe inside and has a phone was something that always annoyed me, especially when it's something that could easily have been explained away with a quick rewrite. Example being, she dropped her phone and chances a moment to leave the car to go and get it back before being attacked. Gale's should go a little more towards common sense, but then given the character deconstruction she went through in Scream 3, I suppose I'm just glad she didn't go back into a totally deserted barn with no lights on. And that is pretty much it as far as the things I didn't like about the film go. Like the Scream original, the film opens on a ringing phone as we meet Sherry and Trudy. What follows is a watered-down, almost shot-for-shot beat of the original Scream opening, only this time with 2 girls, and the whole sequence is designed as a sort of a homage to the first film.
Hello.
Hello.
It also pokes fun at some of the things people have questioned about the previous Scream films.
Well, delete him.
I did, but he hacked his way back in.
I'll report him.
Shows that the film is actually set in the modern day,
I have a Facebook stalker.
and comments on the Saw films.
Well, I like Jigsaw. I think he kills people very creatively.
And this, being a modern horror film, means the characters are both stupid and unlikable.
You hang up on me and I'll cut through your neck until I feel bone.
Who is it?
It's for you.
I don't know if this was intentional, but given the completely unlikable characters that are usually in horror film remakes, I like this because that's just what you'd expect them to do if they were in this situation. The scene plays out pretty much as you'd expect, with Ghostface threatening the girls both on the phone and through Facebook.
He said answer the phone.
The girls eventually open the door, being the horror characters that they are, but find no one.
It says I'm not outside. I'm right beside you.
And I always felt this moment was about giving the fans a nice little bit of service by having 2 Ghostface at the same time. Believe me, some people have written fanfics about this moment since Scream 2 came out. But this isn't actually the start of the film, and instead it's the opening to Stab 6 as 2 different girls, played by Anna Paquin with her clothes on, makes a change, and Kristen Bell, comment on what they've just seen.
The death of horror right here in front of us.
Whereas the opening scene was used to pay homage to Scream's opening, this sequence is used to basically tear the franchise apart, as Anna's character Rachel criticises everything Scream was credited with doing in a rant that's not only very accurate, but is made even funnier for me because of some of the comments people posted on my own Scream videos before the release of Scream 4.
It's been done to death. The whole self-aware, postmodern meta shit.
Meta. Meat. Met. Metrobolism. Yeah, I'll never find out what it means.
You can see everything coming.
Did Williamson just write in that one of his characters just stabbed someone because they were complaining too much? Symbolism, maybe? Say what you want about Williamson, he does know his audience, and his critics. And it's another fake-out, as the Stab 7 title card appears and we meet Jenny Randall, played by Amy T. Garden, and Marnie Cooper, played by Britt Robinson. 6 minutes in, the film has managed to have a dig at the torture porn genre with the Saw films. It's had a dig at Scream's own opening, Scream's legacy, and the endless train of horror sequels that horror seems to be associated with. This feels like a Scream film. The girls converse over horror sequels, and there's a nice comment on the fans who overanalyze everything in a movie.
You're overthinking it. Am I, or did whoever make it just underthink it? There's a reason I don't watch these movies.
Now, I am as guilty as anyone of doing this. I mean, just listening to a Skype conversation with me and Phaelus, Holly, Panda and John, where we deconstruct Doctor Who or Lost. Or, usually I just mention River Song's name, which just sends Phaelus into a blind rage.
Oh, fuck!
you, River Song.
He loves her, really. Before Jenny hears a noise upstairs and goes to investigate while Marnie gets a call.
This is the last person you're ever gonna see alive.
This is basically here to establish that the film is taking place in the present day, a world of apps and iPhones. And just like in real life, the story and legend of the Ghostface killings has almost become something of a joke through each generation.
One generation's tragedy is the next one's joke.
Kids playing Ghostface games, making Ghostface prank calls. There's even an app that makes you sound like Ghostface, and that isn't too far-fetched, because I've got an app that makes me sound like Jigsaw.
I don't see why you get off on this. Marnie?
Heading back down, Jenny finds the phone, but no Marnie.
You don't have the app on your phone, so you can't talk like Ghostface. Can you?
Yes, I can.
Ghostface plays stereotype with Jenny, referring to her as the dumb blonde with the big tits, and in a nice nod to Scream, throws something through the glass panel door. Only in this case, it's not a chair, but the body of Marnie. Chasing Jenny through the house, eventually catching her in the back, she collapses and falls down the stairs. Ghostface takes his time, crushes her spine with the garage door, in what I'm sure is a nice little nod to the Tatum kill from Scream, before eventually finishing her. As I've said, I really enjoyed the opening, and this felt like a Scream opening. Snappy, self-referential dialogue, and a neat way of bringing Scream into the modern era. Recently, the original intended opening was released, which changed Ghostface's entrance and the order of the girl's death. I prefer the cinematic opening myself, as after a 10-year wait, simply having Ghostface just walk in and stand there really doesn't deliver much of a payoff to the audience that have been waiting all this time to see him again. Saying that, if I do take away the nostalgia factor, which admittedly does play a big part in my enjoyment of the film, and if I strip the scene down to its bare bones, it really is nothing more than Ghostface chasing a girl up the stairs, and this is really nothing new as it's happened in every Scream film. The alternate opening certainly feels more like something Williamson would write, and maybe if Craven had been on better form, the scene would have been the one that went into the final film. Saying that, considering how much more brutal the scene is, I always wondered why they didn't use it. Oh, and one final note on this. The blood-smeared Ghostface mask? That is an awesome image. Like all Scream films, after the opening death, the first character we're reintroduced to is Sydney. 10 years later, arriving back in Woodsboro, now a woman and a successful writer, she's in town to promote her new book, Out of Darkness, on the last stop of her book tour, and this is the first time Sydney has returned to Woodsboro since the original murders. We're also introduced to her assistant, Rebecca Walters, played by Alison Brie. Rebecca is definitely one of the more fickle characters. She's selfish, focused on herself and her career rather than the persons around her, and you can tell right from the off that she isn't long for this world. She doesn't even seem to take on board the Ghostface masks in the area.
What do you think? Well, I guess today is the anniversary. Kids. No, I meant the display.
Saying that, she is kind of cute. But she does have a delivery that's very familiar.
So buy your copies while they last. Just wait, Barney Fife. I'm running an event here. You were my 90s. Ooh.
She kind of reminds me of the Makeover Fairy.
Did someone say makeover?
Yeah.
You need a makeover.
The bet isn't up until January.
Bet?
Oh, sorry. The bet's with Elisa, not you. I always get you guys mixed up. Can't imagine why. Why? Do I need a makeover?
Oh, my! Yes. Your glasses and your hair and your clothes and your voice and the color of your skin. Do you ever go outside?
Tell me something. Do you get paid for being this honest, or does it just come naturally to you?
No, silly. I'm the makeover fairy.
Yes, I know. Your reputation precedes you.
Well, then you'll know that there is no job too big for me, and you need a lot of work. I understand fashion, and...
Are those Rio wings? Is there a reason you did that?
Long hair is attractive, and fences are cool, and never, ever question a fairy's wings.
Okay.
My makeover senses are tingling. Someone else is in need. I must go. Duty calls.
Right. That wasn't weird at all. Come to think of it, Why do I have the feeling that's going to have stronger repercussions for me somewhere down the line? Sticking with the older characters, we're reintroduced to Dewey, now the sheriff, and Gale, now a married couple. Things aren't the best between them, as Gale is struggling to write anything due to being stuck in a small town with zero inspiration, while Dewey is constantly being hit on by one of his staff, Deputy Judy Hicks, played by Marley Sheldon. Judy is very much the Dewey of this film, being the cop who takes what she does very seriously, but is never taken seriously by others.
But if you're gonna start acting like him, you gotta put a mustache on because you sound ridiculous.
Old faces reintroduced. We're now introduced to the new blood of Scream 4. On the female side, there's Jill Roberts, Sydney's cousin, played by Emma Roberts, horror geek Kirby Reed, played by Hayden Panettiere, and Olivia Morris, played by Mirella Jeffy. Yeah, right, I don't know how they pronounce those names, and I probably mispronounced them, but hey, at least I'm acknowledging it. On the way to school, Jill gets a phone call from Ghostface, but it's from Jenny's phone.
I asked you a question. What's your favorite scary movie?
Which prompts Olivia to reveal that she got a very similar call, only this one was from Marnie's phone. On the guy's side, there's Jill's boyfriend, ex-boyfriend Trevor Sheldon, played by Nico Tortorella, Cinema Club host Charlie Walker, played by Rory Culkin, and web-obsessed nut Robbie Mercer, played by Eric Knudsen. Someone so tech-obsessed, he walks around with a webcam and broadcasts his whole life under the term Hall Pass with Robbie Mercer. All of them have their own teenage hang-ups. Yes, they're all supposed to be teenagers. Charlie likes Kirby.
Nah, man, she wants me.
Kirby likes Charlie.
To torment, to make him squirm.
Robbie apparently likes Olivia.
Olivia, don't look at my tits. I have a mind, Morris.
And Trevor and Jill used to be together until he cheated on her with Jenny.
And then you just go out with someone else that is not letting her go, that's dumping her. Okay, that's betrayal.
Oh, the complications of high school life. Nicely though, when comparing the Scream 4 characters to the Scream 3 characters, they've already got way more going on in terms of backstory and possible motive than any of the characters did in that film. And this is only from their first scene. Saying that, out of all the new characters, Trevor is the one I like least. He's badly written, badly acted, completely forgettable as a character and an actor, and really seems to have no grasp of how to act in any of his scenes. When trying to come across as suspicious, he looks comical.
I'll show you.
When trying to be concerned, he's too forced.
What happened? Oh my god, Jill.
And I'm supposed to buy that he slept with both Jill and Jenny?
No match for the ninja, baby.
Seriously, he managed to bed Jill and Jenny with chat-up lines like that. Only in the movies. From a new character standpoint, I've already spoken at length about Kirby, and while none of the other characters hit the high notes of the original Scream cast, they are a lot more memorable, I think, than either Scream 2 or Scream 3's cast. You may want to stone me for this, but I've always felt, with Scream 2 having the bigger cast, the only reason a number of them were ever memorable was because of the actors playing them. Cece from Scream 2? If that wasn't Sarah Michelle Gellar, it wouldn't have been so memorable. They were smart in Scream 2. They cast big-name actors to play small-time roles, just to make them memorable. And it worked. Scream 4 doesn't have that luxury. Scream 3, yeah, like I said, they didn't even make a dent. These characters are given personality, backstory, have good lines, given just enough screen time, and are enjoyable to watch. Some people probably hate them, okay, but unlike films like, say, Halloween or anything Fayless ever reviews, they're not written to be foul-mouthed, unlikable shits. Moving back to Sydney, Gail arrives for the signing of her book, and in a very whatever happened to Baby Jane moment, Gail stares with obvious jealousy at the now successful Sydney. I really liked this, as it could be seen as planting the seed of suspicion in Gail, but in a very natural way, given how ambitious she is, and the way Courtney plays it, it could be read in a multiple of ways. Gail and Sydney reunite in a sweet moment before Dewey arrives, and despite a hug, his arrival isn't a good thing, as he's managed to trace a phone from the scene of the opening murder to their location, which they then discover in the back of Sydney's rental along with a Ghostface mask, knife, and a blood-stained photo of Sydney. At the station, Sydney is questioned by Dewey while Gail is frozen out as she's not a police officer, which leads to Gail going against Dewey's wishes and attempting to solve the murder mysteries herself.
Alright, then I'm going rogue.
This is also a good scene to show the tension between Gail and Judy, as the two women clearly don't like each other. You would not believe how happy this scene made me when I was watching the film in the cinema for the first time, as it proved to me without a shadow of a doubt that Williamson was back writing these characters. Also having been brought in for questioning are Jill and Olivia, as they both receive phone calls.
I'm Kirby, by the way. I'm their friend.
Which allows Sydney and Jill to meet for the first time and allows Kirby to completely steal the scene.
Does that mean that I'm not going to live as long as these two?
No. Maybe.
This is a hint, if one was needed, that Kirby is going to have the best dialogue in the film. Okay, so Ghostface is back. So why doesn't Sydney just leave?
And there was evidence in your car connecting the killer to you. You may be a material witness.
It's convenient. Yes, I agree. but it is a nicer way of keeping Sydney around as opposed to, say, Scream 2, when they couldn't even think of a reason to keep her around and she was just there. That night at Jill's, where Sydney now has to stay due to the evidence being found in her rental, we're introduced to Jill's mother, Kate Roberts, played by Mary McDonald, who is also Maureen Prescott's sister. Yes, a sister we've never heard of. I'm not going to reference Scream 3 much during this because Williamson never does, which gives me the impression that he's systematically erasing Scream 3 from the series' history. But regardless, at no point in Scream 1 or 2 did we ever learn that Sydney had family in Woodsboro. Minor nitpick, I know, but it's something that's always gnawed at me a little. Sydney and Dewey, meanwhile, reconnect over current and past events and then share a moment. This has been read many different ways. Some have seen it as them simply sharing a connection due to everything that's gone on between them, and while nothing is stated out loud and it's all left to interpretation, I've always read it as them feeling something more than that simple surrogate brother-sister bond, and I'm sure if there was a Scream 5 written by Kevin Williamson, this is something they would follow up on. Me, personally, a Sydney-Dewey relationship? No, I'm not for that. In Jill's room, Trevor confronts her about the call she received from the killer earlier, but an interruption from Sydney forces Trevor to leave. In a very Billy Loomis-esque way, via the window.
Nothing, you remind me of, me.
Keep all this in mind because it is very important for what happens later on. And to continue building suspicions, we discover Judy and Sydney were in high school together, but Sydney can't remember her.
You don't remember me, do ya?
With Deputy Perkins, played by Anthony Anderson, and Deputy Hoss, played by Adam Brody, stationed around the house, Kirby and Jill watch Shaun of the Dead while next door, Olivia arrives home and, refusing to come up because of Sydney's presence, changes for bed. After an attempted prank call by Jill, Kirby gets a call from Trevor's phone.
I want to talk to Jill.
And while at first not taking the call seriously,
he's trying to do Ghostface.
Kirby's attitude changes when the killer tells her he's standing in the closet.
I never said I was in your closet.
And Ghostface kills Olivia. While I did enjoy this scene, I ultimately felt it was let down by Craven's own direction, as there was nothing really scary or new about it. Seeing Ghostface attacking Olivia, Sydney first tries to attract the police attention, and then, in a moment I love, she runs over to the house and goes inside. She would never have done this in Scream 3. She'd more than likely have stayed with the girls or stood on the porch shouting, "Dewey! Dewey, where are you?" Also, thanks to the teaser editing, which I did see, with Sydney doing this, there was a real fear for me that she could go here. Getting inside, Sydney discovers Olivia's mangled body and then receives a call.
Welcome home, Sydney. Preview of coming events.
This is a pretty interesting phone call between Sydney and Ghostface, as he sounds almost bitter about the fame she's accumulated due to her life in the spotlight, which clearly hints at a new motive for this killer.
You've done very well by all this bloodshed, haven't you? Well, how about the town you left behind?
Jill arrives moments later and Ghostface attacks, but Sydney shoves her to one side with the killer's knife slicing Jill's arm. Sydney grapples with Ghostface before delivering sweet chin music, which floors him, but in a moment distraction from the police, Ghostface vanishes. Backing up to what I said earlier, the original Olivia death scene wasn't the best, but once Sydney arrived at the scene of the crime, the sequence got really good. It showed how much stronger Sydney has become, both mentally and physically, had a great trade-off between Sydney and Ghostface over the phone, and allowed Sydney to actually fight Ghostface and not run from him. Some people may say this makes Ghostface look weak, but through Scream 1 and 2 we've seen him get slammed and hit many times by many different people. But these are always people running away from him. This was something different. You don't expect Sydney to A, run over to the house, and you certainly don't expect her to grapple with him. At the hospital, Gail makes a deal with Robbie and Charlie to exchange information about who could possibly be the killer, on condition that she brings Sydney to the next cinema club, which, in keeping with her frustration, does annoy her a little.
Ooh. Yes, she's Daniel Radcliffe to my J.K. Rowling.
Well, without the book sales and the box office.
He's got a point. Inside, Sydney and Jill are patched up, and Rebecca shows her contempt and motivation by dismissing everything that's been going on around her.
I know you care about your readers, all those little downtrodden fucks.
Which leads to Sydney firing her. Heading towards her car, Rebecca gets a phone call from Ghostface, and after getting into her car where she is safe, the car won't start because of Ghostface. So she makes the stupid decision to leave her car, where Ghostface kills her and throws her body off the car park roof right down into the middle of a Dewey-hosted press conference as he's telling the people how his department has the situation well in hand. Dewey. He'll never learn. The Rebecca sequence is just one of those major groan moments for me. I touched on it earlier, but she's in her car, which, okay, won't start, but she has a phone. She drops the phone in the car, yes, but it's still in the car. A simple call to the police would have solved that problem. Having her get out of the car is not only stupid, but it stinks of lazy writing. I don't know why they just didn't have Ghostface smash through the glass. It would have at least given her a reason to get out of the car. The next day at the cinema club, which both Sydney and Gale attend, Robbie and Charlie lay out the rules, citing remakes and cliches as a motive and method to discover the possible killer.
Well, if you want to be the new version, the killer should be filming the murders.
As well as listing what you need to do to actually survive a modern horror film.
Modern audiences get savvy to the rules of the originals, so the reversals become the new standard. In fact, the only surefire way to survive a modern horror movie, you pretty much have to be gay.
And the likelihood of where the killer will strike next.
A party.
Charlie admits that among the parties taking place on the Woodsboro murder anniversary, one will be Stabathon, a night where every single stab film is shown back to back, which he hosts every year, but refuses to give the information to Gale, which prompts Gale and Sydney to leave. This is actually a really interesting sequence in a few ways. While it does feel like they're attempting to recreate the Randy moments from Scream 1 and 2, it's also a very thorough deconstruction of the horror movie trend of having nothing but remakes, and it's a pretty fun commentary on the current state of the genre, while having a trace of irony laced through it, as all this dialogue is being spoken by a horror character in a third sequel. Coupled with the scene setting and the posters scattered around the room, there's plenty here to keep any Scream fan happy for months from an analysis standpoint. That night, with the same detectives on duty outside the house, Jill and Sydney bond a little over their recent losses, with Jill questioning Sydney about how she can handle some of the things in her life.
People staring at you all the time.
People stare at me.
And this again actually is very clever writing based on what happens at the end of the film, which I'll touch on later. While Jill stays at home, Kirby heads to the star party, which is hosted in an old barn, and encounters the walking human stud that is Trevor. Gale has also discovered the party location and slips inside under a Ghostface mask to plant cameras and dance. Badly. But I'm sure that was intentional. The Stabathon starts with the first stab, made a nice touch using the same footage and score from Scream 2, as the drinking rules are laid down. Oh yeah, my kind of party.
Who's ready to drink every time someone screams the word?
And in a moment I find hilarious and unnervingly realistic, the gathered students basically quote the entire film.
You know, I don't even know him.
It's sad because it's true. But I'm pretty sure there's people out there who can quote their favourite film word for word as well. With her camera set in place, Gale returns to her car and watches as each camera is suddenly covered up or turned off. Contacting Dewey, she begs him to help her, which leads to one of my favourite conversations in the whole film.
How meta can you get?
How what can you get?
I don't know, I heard him say it.
I love that line. Going back inside to fix her equipment, she spots a webcam filming her. Outside, Dewey arrives, and through the camera Gale is holding behind her back, Dewey spots Ghostface approaching Gale. Gale notices just in time, and Ghostface chases her around the hay bales before eventually flooring her while Casey's death in Stab 1 is played on screen in the background. Dewey arrives and takes a shot, but he's a lousy shot, and misses. Ghostface stabs Gale in the shoulder before she pushes him away and falls to the floor below. Now I know what they were trying to do with this scene, and after checking out the trailers, it's very obvious they were trying to fool the audience into thinking Gale could go in this scene. The problem, again, is that there is nothing really new about it. The stalk of the character against the stab opening was done in Scream 2, and it was done a lot better. And I really never felt that Gale was in danger. The shock of Randy's death in Scream 2 was because of how well it was built up, and how out of nowhere Ghostface appeared. Here, we know Ghostface is present due to the camera turn, and he doesn't even jump out. He's just caught entering the room. And I'm actually glad Gale didn't die in this scene, because as a character, she deserves a lot more, and if she's going to die, she deserves a much better death than that. Back at Jill's house, Detective Hoss is doing his rounds, and upon returning to the car, he spots Perkins slumped against the steering wheel. No! I hate it when characters do that in horror films. Ghostface clearly does too, because he kills Hoss with a knife to the back, and then, to emphasise his point, stabs Perkins through the forehead.
Ooh, nasty.
Yeah, I'm glad I was able to work that one in. This, surprisingly, kills him too. Inside, Kate arrives with grocery bags, and after she leaves with the immortal words,
I'll be right back.
Sydney gets another call from Ghostface.
You're a survivor, aren't you, Sydney?
Who directs Sydney to turn on the news, where she learns of Gale's fate. Now taunting, Ghostface reveals he's going to target Sydney's family and friends before attacking her last.
You can't save them. All you can do is watch.
Heading up to Jill's room, Sydney discovers that Jill's gone, having been picked up by Kirby, so she can escape the prison that has become her house. Heading back downstairs, Kate's returned, and she reveals that the police are missing. Deciding to head to Kirby's, Sydney spots Ghostface's reflection in the wind chimes, closes the door, and they head to the front. Managing to block the door, Sydney attempts to leave via the back, but Ghostface stabs his knife through the letterbox, which connects with Kate's neck and it kills her. Moments later, with Ghostface seemingly vanished, Hicks arrives and calls in the police, but Sydney, now knowing Ghostface's plan, heads for Kirby's, which is now apparently the substitute house for Stu's house in this film. At Kirby's, where Jill, Charlie and Robbie have all gathered due to the Stabathon being shut down, Trevor arrives, causing uproar as he claims Jill invited him, which Jill denies and leaves to find her phone to prove Trevor's lying, so Trevor follows her. Spotting the spark between Charlie and Kirby, Robbie leaves and drunkenly broadcasts to his web audience before going for a quick wander. Inside, Charlie and Kirby nearly have a moment before Trevor interrupts, which causes Charlie to leave too.
Did I just interrupt something right here?
I'll say it again. This guy managed to sleep with her and her. What, did he use drugs or were they both drunk? Back outside, Robbie approaches the front door, but it opens before he can touch it, revealing Ghostface, who stabs him in the chest and the back.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I love the little tilt of head Ghostface does just before he basically says to himself, I don't know, fuck it. And back inside, Kirby encounters Jill coming down the staircase, claiming that there was never a text sent to Trevor and that he didn't follow her upstairs. Attempting to find their friends, Kirby opens the front door only to find Sydney, who's come for Jill, but before they can escape, Ghostface appears and chases Sydney and Jill upstairs. Sydney locks herself and Jill into Kirby's room, and taking Jill's phone, she orders Jill to hide under the bed, and when Ghostface enters, he catches Sydney on the roof, faking shouted instructions to Jill about running to get help. Ghostface begins to stalk Sydney along the rooftop before apparently giving up. This quick moment of safety allows Sydney to contact Dewey and inform him of her location. Okay. I'll be honest, first time watching the film in the cinema, I really thought she was going to get it here. Dropping to the ground below, Sydney runs into Kirby, who locks them both away downstairs, only for Charlie to appear outside, his hands covered in blood.
If you can't trust him, don't open the door.
Charlie pleads with Kirby to let him in, but Kirby refuses, only for Ghostface to appear behind Charlie and tackle him. Sydney and Kirby are helpless as the lights go out, and when they come back on, they find Charlie has been gagged and taped to a chair in the middle of the patio, just like Steve from Scream 1. Alright, and what follows now is my favourite scene in Scream 4. Ghostface contacts Kirby, blaming Sydney for everything that's happening, and using this moment, Sydney sneaks back upstairs to find Jill, while Kirby basically becomes the Casey Becker of Scream 4. Ghostface toys with her, asking her a number of warm-up questions, all of which Kirby answers correctly. Kirby begs Ghostface to ask her one final question.
Name the remake of the groundbreaking horror movie in which the villain...
Halloween!
And in one of the most glorious surreal moments, Kirby reels off every horror remake that we've had to put up with in the last few years.
Texas Chainsaw, Dawn of the Dead, The Hills Have Eyes, Amityville Horror, Last House on the Left, Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, My Bloody Valentine, When a Stranger Calls, Prom Night, Black Christmas, House of Wax, The Fog, Piranha. It's one of those, right?
This is not only a great scene tension-wise, but it's also a great commentary on the state of horror at the moment. In the space of 15 seconds, she manages to reel off 15 remakes, all of which had done nothing to help the monsters those films made famous, and if anything, they tarnished their franchises to beyond help. With no answer from Ghostface, Kirby leaves the house and frees Charlie, convinced she got the question right.
This is making a move.
Charlie stabs her a second time and leaves her, bleeding and dying on the patio floor. We don't see or hear from her for the rest of the film, but as far as I'm concerned, Kirby isn't dead. Regardless of what people say or do, no, she's not dead. She's still moving here, she's still alive. I don't care what anyone says, she's still alive, she's not dead. Okay? Fine. Back inside, Sydney, finding Jill is gone, returns to the basement only to get caught by Charlie. Managing to free herself, she runs into Ghostface, who stabs her in the stomach and unmasks himself to reveal...
Hello, Sydney.
Okay, this killer reveal I both like and question. For starters, Ghostface has been at least a foot taller than either Charlie or Jill through this whole film, so I don't buy either of them being under the mask. Also, Charlie was at the Stabathon, Jill was picked up by Kirby. So who is the Ghostface that was attacking Sydney and Kate? If it was Jill, okay, but then where was Kirby? And if it was Charlie, how did he get to the house? I do buy, however, Jill being the mastermind. Go back and watch the whole film and concentrate on her performance. Little things like mimicking Sydney's body language, to the way she dresses, to how she acts, the things she says both as herself and as Ghostface in the calls. She's been both insanely jealous and playing the victim through the whole film, and the questions she's been asking Sydney and the scenario she's orchestrated through the whole film have been designed specifically to not only mimic the events of Scream 1, but to make her appear to be Sydney.
This has never been about killing you. It's about becoming you.
Remember what I said in my Scream 1 review about that particular film's climax? The following scene may shock you. If you ever wanted to see insanity brought to life, this is the scene. This is that times 100. Jill, using Charlie's crush and the story that, like before, Sydney and Randy would be the sole survivors, masterminded the whole affair, like Billy Loomis before her, and attempts to bring the whole thing back to Trevor, like Neil Prescott. The difference here, Jill actually succeeds. Charlie unveils Trevor, bound and gagged just like Sydney's father from Scream. Initially claiming they're going to pin the whole thing on Trevor,
I am not the girl you cheat on.
and I'm pretty sure every guy watching this video, and perhaps some of the girls, just winced quite loudly when they realised where she shot him. The funniest thing about that for me, though, is that when this happened in the cinema, there was a guy sitting behind me who reacted so loudly and painfully, I started laughing. And it can only make me imagine that he must have some sort of experience in that area, because it was a genuine reaction from him. She kills Trevor with a shot to the head and then kills Charlie, as she always intended to frame him along with Trevor, making them the modern day Billy and Stu. Jill then goes into an insane jealous rant about the current state of celebrity and fame.
How do you think people become famous anymore? You don't have to achieve anything.
And you know what? She's right. You only have to look at the celebrity landscape these days, with people like Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian commanding so much media attention for basically doing nothing except, well, lying on their backs. Then she stabs Sydney, who falls to the floor bleeding fatally. And in a very similar beat to Roman in Scream 3, Jill almost seems to lose herself for a moment as she appears she's actually killed Sydney and has gotten away with this. What follows is both hilarious and shocking at the same time. Jill now sets about creating the scene Billy and Stu originally planned to create at the end of Scream 1. First, she frees Trevor and plants the murders on him with the weapons, and next, she bloodies herself, first using Trevor's hand to pull out some of her hair and mark her face, before slamming a knife into her arm. She follows this up by throwing herself face first into a glass frame, and then throwing herself back first through a table, before stumbling over to the fallen Sydney and passing out, attempting one final time to mimic Sydney. There's not a lot you can say about that sequence other than it being totally batshit crazy. It's also a nice look at what could have happened had Billy and Stu been successful, as there's no doubt in my mind that Billy would eventually have pinned the blame on Stu and set himself up to be the sole survivor. I literally spent that whole sequence in the cinema, eyes wide, just trying to take everything in. And that's Scream 4. It has its haters, and I'm honestly not blind to its flaws. I know they are there, but I'm sure people out there have a few films sitting on their shelves that others hate, and it doesn't matter to them. People did wonder about the character of Kincaid, and the rumour was he was going to be in this film but had to decline due to appearing in Transformers Dark of the Moon. But given that Williamson seemed determined to erase any and all mention of Scream 3, I don't think he'd have lasted long in this film had he been in it. Yeah. Right, you think that was the end? Finally, the police arrive and take Jill to the hospital. Reflecting on everything that's happened, Jill inquires about Gail, who is still alive.
We'd be a good team with our matching wounds and all.
Anne mourns the loss of Sydney and her friends, only for Dewey to inform her that Sydney is in the ICU and may still pull through. Dewey leaves Jill to check on Gail, so Jill leaves her room and goes looking for Sydney, determined to kill her once and for all. In Gail's room, Dewey comments on Jill's remark about their matching wounds.
Why, she was stabbed in the shoulder? How did she know I was too?
Uh-oh. Sydney awakens, only to find Jill standing next to her bedside. Well, I guess family are allowed.
Who are you? Michael fucking Myers?
That remark is funny, but it's equally funny for me because when Sydney wakes up in the cinema, I actually turned to Pip and uttered that very phrase before Jill did. My problem with this scene, though? Where the hell is everybody? Where are the police? Where are the doctors? Sydney's in ICU. There would be doctors present. Sydney and Jill get into a fight. She's in ICU. She shouldn't be able to do this. Gail's walking around the hospital. She should not be able to do this. Okay, logic stretching aside. Sydney and Jill fight, but Sydney is in no condition to mount a serious challenge, but at the same time, she doesn't do too bad for a girl in the ICU. Hearing Dewey approach, Jill hides away and attacks him with a bedpan, and then says something that I'm pretty sure everybody was thinking by this point.
The ending of the movie was supposed to be at the house. I mean, this is just silly.
Gail arrives, leading Jill to pull a gun on her, but before she pulls the trigger, Judy tackles Gail out of sight, but then Jill demands she hand over the gun, or she'll kill Dewey. Judy does this, and then is ordered to stand up, which she also does.
Don't do anything stupid.
Ordering Gail to stand, Jill points her gun at both Sydney and Dewey, and now, finally, this is actually a tense scene, as I believed one of them could go. Face to face with Gail, Gail requests a final word.
What? Please?
Clear.
Clear?
Clear.
This moment allows Sydney to reel off a line that I know has made many a person cheer, including myself.
You forgot the first rule of remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original.
I swear, words cannot express how much I love that line. Surprisingly, Hicks is still alive thanks to a bulletproof vest, but so is Jill. For about another moment anyway. And the film closes with the press singing Jill's praises, giving her the fame and attention she always desired in life. And that really is Scream 4. Having checked out a number of the deleted scenes, it is a shame a lot of them weren't included in the final cut, especially the one showing the aftermath of the first murder. Performance-wise, the acting is much better than Scream 3, which admittedly wasn't that hard. Neve Campbell shines as Sydney, imbuing her with the strength, likeableness and genuine kindness that Sydney has always maintained.
Beyond Jamie Lee Curtis, forget Linda Blair, I mean, this is the ultimate.
The only difference being she's a character that's been to hell and didn't let it destroy her. She is without doubt the heart of this franchise, and with the character now being 10 years older and much more world-weary, the writing and the acting reflects this. My favourite moments though are always those quiet ones. Her little scene with Dewey and her talk with Jill are both really well written, quiet moments that allow the performance to shine through.
You know when people say, I know how you feel? But you know they're just saying that because they really have no frickin' idea how you feel. I know how you feel.
David Arquette suffers the most in the film as far as the core three go, but that's more from a script standpoint than an acting one. He fits back into the role of Dewey like he hasn't missed a beat, but with Dewey's role reduced in this film, he is given a lot less to do, which, like I said earlier, I kinda like. Still, my favourite Dewey moments are those quiet character moments, both when he's with Sydney at Jill's and when he's standing over Gail's bedside and he tells her he loves her.
I love you.
Courtney Cox, like I said, is probably the best of the three, but that's only because she seems to be having the most fun. That's not to say Neve and David aren't, but the Gail role allows the actress to have a little more fun. She says the things people wish they could say. And the feeling of just seeing all three of them together again, in their roles, playing them like they haven't missed a beat, is just another reason to why I really enjoyed this film. One final thing I'd like to comment on though is the handling of Ghostface. Despite having a larger cast than Scream and a higher death count, thanks to the writing and the pacing, it doesn't feel like he was shoved down my throat like he was in Scream 3. His appearance is a quick, brief, and helps build to the next attack. Would I like another Scream film? Honestly, no. I love these characters, and now, as far as I can see, there is no feasible way that you could have them die in a film that will make the death mean anything. They've survived 4 films, and with Craven publicly stating that Courtney Cox wanted to die in this one, and that if there was another one, it is very likely that they'd kill off more than one, I don't want that to happen. Add in the fact that Williamson wouldn't be writing a Scream 5, it's giving me every signal and indication that they should not make it. But all signs are showing that they will actually make another one, despite this one not ending on a cliffhanger or setting up a future film. Kinda like this review, actually. There's no overhanging storyline and no setup for a future review. Look at that. Hello?
Yeah, Welshy, you're gonna review Killjoy 2.
Oh, I'm gonna fucking kill you at MagFest!
You know, quite frankly, you can see it right now, but I'm not wearing any pants. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no pants. Well, I've got shorts, but if you can look closely, I don't have my braces, which means I don't have my pants. No, I'm not going to get up just so you can see my pants. No, that's really weird, Welshy. Yeah, I think I've been going on for too long right now, but you know how much I love to improvise, yeah. Yeah, that's right, I know. If you ever show this to people, they might be surprised, because they're like, ooh, all of this is scripted, well, she wrote this, and actually, no, it's been